Trump has gone all out, once again pressuring Powell. His only demand in pressuring Powell is that the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates drastically, from the current level of around 4.25% to 1%. For an ordinary person, facing Trump's obvious personal attacks and tirades, they might have collapsed long ago. However, Powell remains as stubborn as a granite stone. He neither resigns nor expresses willingness to cut interest rates. What makes Powell so firm? It is because there are lessons from the past. In the early 1970s, the U.S. economy was mired in the quagmire of stagflation, with the unemployment rate reaching 6.1% and inflation exceeding 5.8%. Under normal circumstances, such economic performance would make re-election an almost impossible task. Then U.S. President Nixon came up with a drastic measure, pressuring the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates rapidly to create a short-term illusion of prosperity, aiming to boost his election campaign. During that period, Nixon resorted to both coercion and inducement against Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns. In the third and fourth quarters of 1971 alone, the two met as many as 17 times per quarter. In short, Nixon's main tactic was to subject Burns to intense political coercion. Eventually, Burns chose to compromise. In 1971, the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates sharply from 5% to 3.5%, and the growth rate of M1 money supply hit a post-World War II peak of 8.4%. As a result, Nixon got his wish. He not only won re-election successfully but also became the first sitting U.S. president to visit China in 1972. Meanwhile, Burns was branded with infamy. After a brief period of prosperity, the U.S. economy, coupled with the oil crisis, saw a massive outbreak of domestic inflation. It surged rapidly from 8.8% in 1973 to 12.3% in 1974, while the unemployment rate rose from 4.9% in 1973 to 8.5% in 1975. This was followed by a collapse in the U.S. dollar index and a skyrocketing gold price, plunging the U.S. economy into its darkest hour. For this, Burns bore the stigma for a lifetime, his name becoming a byword for central banks losing their independence. In the aftermath, the United States learned its lesson bitterly and erected firewalls. In 1977, it revised the Federal Reserve Act, explicitly establishing price stability as the Federal Reserve's statutory core objective. The Supreme Court also issued multiple rulings to reinforce that the president has no authority to dismiss the Federal Reserve Chair over policy disagreements. These firewalls have maintained the Fed's independence for nearly half a century. However, they are now ineffective against Trump, who is accustomed to wielding hegemonic power. Since taking office, Trump has lashed out at Powell countless times in his push to get the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates. In April of this year, Trump even directly stated that he wanted Powell to resign. These remarks triggered a massive shock in the U.S. capital markets. Investors were worried that Powell might not be able to withstand the pressure and resign, leaving the Federal Reserve under Trump's control. As a result, investors voted with their feet and scrambled to sell dollar assets. In the end, it was only after persuasion from Besson, a veteran with roots in Wall Street, that Trump reluctantly let Powell off the hook. However, now that the big two U.S. bills have been passed, the Trump administration is set to expand its debt by another several $1 trillion. With the federal interest rate currently as high as 4.5% and existing debt exceeding $37 trillion, adding several more $1 trillion in debt would mean that over 20% of federal fiscal revenue would have to be allocated to interest payments. Who could withstand such a burden? What is more important is that next year will be the midterm elections. If the Trump administration fails to deliver a strong economic performance by then, it is likely to suffer a defeat in the midterms, which would result in the Republican Party losing control of Congress and leaving Trump in an extremely passive position. Therefore, Trump is now throwing caution to the wind and once again resorting to various tactics to politically coerce Powell. However, Powell is determined not to become the second Burns. His reasoning is simple: Americans may forgive a Federal Reserve Chair who causes a recession, but they will never forgive one who ignites inflation. To be honest, I'm not optimistic that Powell can withstand Trump's pressure. The reason is simple: Powell is a typical technocrat, while Trump is a politician. In human history, those focused on technology have never been able to outmaneuver those playing politics. The recent Fed renovation scandal has become Trump's breakthrough in targeting Powell. In 2017, the Federal Reserve Board approved the renovation of the Fed's headquarters building, completed in 1937, and adjacent historic preservation structures. Construction officially began in 2021, with an estimated total cost of $1.90 billion. However, even though the project is not yet completed, it has been exposed that the cost has soared from $1.9 billion to $2.5 billion, a 30% overrun. I suspect Trump's team went through these reports with a fine-tooth comb before uncovering these irregularities. Why is there a $700 million cost overrun? Why are there luxurious facilities like a VIP restaurant and a rooftop garden? Even Larry Kudlow, director of the National Economic Council, publicly shouted to the entire nation, "This isn't renovating the Fed building, this is building the Palace of Versailles." Just look at these questions. How many American citizens could tolerate such waste after hearing them? Squandering taxpayers' money is a cardinal sin in the U.S. and it never fails to stir public outrage. Admittedly, even if these over-the-top projects are true, they're trivial in the grand scheme of things in America. Compared to the exorbitant costs of items like coffee cups and toilets in the U.S. military, this is truly a drop in the bucket. But as the saying goes, when those in power want to make an example of you, even a $1 overrun will land you in hot water with no way out.